great to have Terrie Howey talk to us, aka Red Phoenix, about the work she's been doing on storytelling in Milton Keynes. I came across, and Steve's heard this because I made a reference to it last night, a wonderful story of Stony Stratford in 1450 when Henry VI was on his way to Northampton for Parliament, and he was berated by a man with a flail who wished him to take action against the Duke of York, who was extorting the people of Ireland. This was in a book about the Battle of Northampton. You kind of see my obscure reading, Terrie. Prepare for an event such as this.
I'm impressed with your research.
Yeah, there you go. See, I thought I haven't heard that one. You know, this is a piece of Stony Stratford history that's completely missing.
Wonderful. Well, there is a little form at the back to leave you details if you have a story to give me.
I'll pass it on. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Terrie Howey, Red Phoenix, Storytelling in Milton Keynes.
Hello, good evening. Thank you everyone for turning out this evening and to come listen to me. So, a storyteller. Let's start with that bit. Not many people have met storytellers. I usually introduce myself and say, hello, I'm a professional storyteller, and they go, oh, so a professional liar then? That's usually politicians. But I have been a practicing storyteller since 2004. I started my own storytelling business in 2007, and I've worked locally, nationally, and internationally, and it has been a wonderful way to spend my life, getting paid to talk and share stories and just meet very diverse people. But I was always telling stories. I was telling stories since I was 4 years old, and that's the way that I learned and I understood. I'm severely dyslexic, and I find reading and writing incredibly difficult. And so stories were the way that I framed everything. If I could understand the story, then I could understand all the facts and all the information that goes into it. And that journey of being a storyteller led me to, in 2013, come to Wolverton. There was the British Awards for Storytelling Excellence evening happening, and I came along to the launch on the 11th of September 2013, and it was at Madcap, or Creed Street, as I knew it when I first arrived. And when I was first into the building, lovely Victorian building surrounded by poets and artists and other storytellers and actors, and such a diverse collection of artists from the local area. The person who was the third bard of Stony Stratford came up to me and said, have you ever been to Milton Keynes before? And I said, no. And he said, what's the difference between Milton Keynes and a pot of yoghurt? And I said, I don't know. And he said,
there's more culture in a pot of yogurt.
Exactly.
Oh no, there isn't.
Exactly. Because this struck me as a very bizarre thing for somebody to say. Especially somebody who was supposed to be representing the cultural identity of the local area in such a wonderful building surrounded by so many artistic people. And I was like, well, there's a lot of heritage going on just in this room. And that always stuck with me. It always jarred. And after I'd been and performed at that, I then, a few local people had seen what I did and they were quite interested, so they asked me back, and I came back and I did a bit more storytelling, and I came back and I ended up working in Bletchley Park as a living history actress. I was Thelma Orton. Now do make sure you put in your medical records. We don't want any bits to go missing if you get blown up. And after that, I was working in schools, and teachers were saying to me, oh, we're doing a local history project. We don't really have a lot of history here in Milton Keynes, we're new, so you know, if anything that you can find would be good. And I was astonished, because as a storyteller, the way I get to know a place is through its stories. So that moment, before even I came to Wolverton, I was looking at the stories of the area, because the gig I was doing was in Wolverton, and so I needed maybe a ghost story or something interesting to happen. And so I was researching the area before I even arrived. And from doing those school groups, I then got headhunted to become the education officer at the City Discovery Centre, to tell the story of Milton Keynes to school groups and to basically anybody who would listen, businesses coming from around the world. And it was during that I heard that there was a PhD happening in Loughborough, a PhD for applied storytelling and heritage. And instantly I knew I wanted it, because not only was that an area I was fascinated by, and I had my question. Why did so many people in Milton Keynes think that there was no cultural heritage when I saw an abundance? And that was really the start of it. I also wanted to do it at Loughborough with my now current supervisor, Mike Wilson. And I came across Mike Wilson when I was doing my undergraduate, when I was first exploring storytelling academically. And I came across one of his books called Story and Theatre. And over the years, whenever I had the opportunity to work with Mike, I had always found a way to invite him onto a panel, to have a chat, to come to the Society of Storytelling gatherings. So that's a big national gathering of storytellers. And I invited Mike to a lot of those. But it was 2016, about May time, I received an anonymous email saying, check out Loughborough's website, there's a PhD going. So I applied, and my interview was on the referendum day. So there was a lot of things riding on that day for a whole number of reasons, but for me the most important factor was my interview. I got the place. So what am I doing? Well, I am looking at how storytelling with heritage can be a form of heritage and also be the means by which we share heritage. We are all storytellers. We storytell every single day of our lives. When somebody asks us about our day, we don't tell them absolutely everything, do we? We don't sort of sit there and go, oh, well, you know, I spent exactly 10 minutes in the bathroom and in there I was doing... We tell them what we want them to know. So we story-tell our lives, we share our lives through stories. But if we are all storytellers, that also means something else. We are all curators of heritage. We decide what we pass on to other people. We tell people about the place that we live. We tell people about their history and the heritage we want people to know. And here in Milton Keynes we have a problem. We have a national narrative shouting, screaming at us that we have no cultural heritage because we're just new and we're just roundabouts and concrete cows. But I've been going out and doing interviews with people all from all the different Grid Square communities and chatting to them, and people don't have a bad sense of place about Milton Keynes. They like it. They think a lot of the time that there's problems, but there's problems everywhere. But they praise a lot of what's going on here in Milton Keynes. So where is this myth coming from that there is a poor sense of place in Milton Keynes? Because it's even on the council website, on their arts and heritage strategy planning. There's a poor sense of place, and this completely bothers me. So this is what I set out to explore. And I have to say, my first year, I got sucked in as well, because I was going, oh yes, Milton Keynes, there's a poor sense of place. I'm going to cure this sense of place with stories. I'm going to go into Grid Square communities, I'm going to tell stories of heritage, people are going to get excited, they're going to go, oh, did that happen in Milton Keynes? Brilliant, lovely, I feel better about Milton Keynes. And then I started doing the interview and went, people don't feel better about Milton Keynes, but I'll tell them stories anyway. And then I became more interested about the effect that storytelling has on people when engaging with their heritage, because it does still change the sense of place, it does still change how people connect to the area. And the reason I believe this is because a space is a non-emotional entity. So in order for us to make some sort of emotional connection to where we live, we have to give it a personality. We have to give it some sort of life that imagines that it has emotions too, because once it has emotions and we have emotions, we can share emotions and we develop a place out of the space. And we do that through stories, the stories that we know about it. The stories give it a character. You know, Dick Turpin stories, it's a little bit of a rogue, isn't it? Great grand histories, kings and queens, even if they're up to no good. It gives us a sense of belonging to a national narrative. Really important when in 50 years we had 491% increase in population in this area. It's a massive amount. A lot of new people came in. So the old stories, the stories of the soil, well, they got overcome with a rhetoric of newness. And so we're trying to find those stories again. We're trying to connect to it. Because when you move somewhere new, it is hard to make connections. And it's hard to make connections to other people. But the one thing that we all have in common, whether we lived in Milton Keynes before it became Milton Keynes or whether we moved in afterwards, is that we're all here now. And we're all sharing what it is to be in Milton Keynes now. And Milton Keynes now didn't just appear during the 70s. It's been here for a long time, and some of the stories that I found have gone back in history and recount things going back 2,000 years. So there's a lot of history, and when you start to look at the archaeology, there's archaeology going back in this area even to about 3,000 years. So for me, stories, I'm passionate about them. I'm passionate that they can make a difference in our lives. They're not just something for children, they're something we're all engaging with all the time, even if we don't know it. And because we're all storytellers and because we're all cultural historians and passing on heritage through these stories, you need to maybe be a little bit more aware. So that brings me here to you. I did a project called Knowing My Milton Keynes. There's some information up about it there. The shows that I took around were an hour long, they were free, and I did a collection of stories. Most of the stories stayed the same from one site to the other, but I made sure that there was a section in every single grid square that I visited four. I did Broughton, Connemara, Stony Stratford and Wolverton. And I picked those areas because of their historical and also their economic status. So it was comparing whether any of these factors had issues on the stories that were kept or the people that engaged with them. And it was quite interesting to discover that when I started comparing how many stories I found in different sites, Stony Stratford, I found a lot of stories. There's a lot of stories and people are still telling stories about Stony Stratford. But it was also the area that I had the most people turn up to a storytelling performance. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that says something. I think because people are telling stories and engaging with the stories and remember these stories, that they're interested in finding out new stories, so they'll come along. Whereas Connemara, it was very difficult to find a story there. I did find a couple in the end, but one person turned up. And again, I don't think that's a coincidence. An area that didn't seem to have a lot of stories, didn't seem to really be interested, they didn't understand what stories did for them. So once I get out of my PhD, that's an area I'm going to hit here. I'm just going to go in there and go, stories, everybody! Listen to the stories. So, Knowing My Milton Keynes involved 4 performances, which was Once Upon a Milton Keynes. It involved participants being engaged in 6 storytelling workshops. They explored oral storytelling and digital storytelling to see how not just people experience me when I stand up and give a story, but how people experience when they give it a go themselves, and to see what effect that had on them. And tonight. It includes tonight as well. This is, I grandiosely call it my exhibition. Maybe not quite an exhibition, but you can certainly see bits that have been collated from where I am at the moment, because I'm about to go into my writing up here, so I'm just kind of gathering the information and still sifting through it and trying to discover little bits of revelations, really. So we will have a break a little bit later on, and when we do, I will encourage you, if you haven't already looked at this poster just over here. This one explains a little bit more about what I did, where, and some of the information. Here we have, on the laptops, there's, this one here is videos of performances that I did in 4 grid squares. The one in the middle is a film about the planning of Milton Keynes with Fred Roach. And then the one at the end is the participants' work, so you can see they're all on their digital stories. If they stop at any point, just tap the left button on the keypad and they'll start again. So hopefully, I'm a storyteller, not a technician, so if anything goes wrong, do holler. And I should point out just at the back there, that is my feedback corner. Obviously, you're all here for free, but I'm going to ask something of you. See, I'm still generating data. So if there's questionnaires there, so if you'd like to fill in the questionnaire, that would be really useful. There's a little slip of paper where it guides you to a website where you can either do an online questionnaire or you can leave me a story if you want to type it up. There is also a sign-up sheet that if you quite fancy maybe being interviewed, if you have any sort of something special to tell me about Milton Keynes, or maybe even not something that particularly special. Maybe you're somebody who goes, I don't have a good sense of place. I think Milton Keynes is rotten. Brilliant. Because I haven't found many of you, and you approve some of my earlier theories. So if there's anybody out there who feels like that, that's just as valid. I'm quite happy to come and interview you. You can moan at me all you like. I will spend an hour happily listening. But if you have a story and you don't want to type it up, you would prefer me to come along and audio record you, then also leave your details. And if you could just leave next to it whether you're interested in an interview or interested in a story, if you leave that next to either your telephone number or your email. I'm going to give you a chance to ask a lot of questions later. I'm aware I've sort of rattled through this and given you a lot of information at a fast rate of knots, but that's because I want to get to the best bit of this evening, the bit where I start to tell stories. Because I have some stories that I am going to bring along to you. These were stories that I told in the show. I'm not going to give you the whole show, it was an hour, so I'm just going to give you some of the stories that I particularly liked, my favourites. And I've picked them with a slightly Stony-centric theme, because I'm figuring most people here are probably from the local area, and so they'll probably be more interested in that. But if you are interested in any of the other areas, I'll direct you to videos. They will be online as well soon. So yes, if you take a think about the website, you'll be able to see them at your leisure at some point in the next month or so. So I'm going to start with a story about the High Street. You see, about 50 odd years ago, maybe a little bit more, Costa wasn't there, surprisingly enough. There was a hardware store called Chippendales. Not that Chippendales. Chipperfield, sorry, Chipperfield. Sorry, the book that I read, I'll have to double check my research, go back and check my sources. So Chipperfield, and one side of it did just glass and china, and the rest of it was the hardware store. One day, somebody, a farmer, was herding his cattle down the high street, which was not an uncommon sight. And as he was herding the cattle down the high street, one of the cows, not a concrete one, decided that it was going to go and check out, maybe it was wanting to get an early Christmas present, I don't know, but it popped into the shop. and started trotting around the glass and the china. Well, you've heard of a bull in a china shop. This was a cow. We like to do things slightly differently in Stony Stratford. But you can imagine the owner of the shop absolutely terrified, thinking, oh good grief, there's going to be complete carnage. But apparently the cow trotted round very calmly, perused the china and the glassware, gave a little brrrr as it left, and then joined its herd and carried up and down the high street. Curious things happen in this town. But let's go back a little bit further. Most of you will at some point or another have been into Odell's. So we've gone from one hardware shop to another. Well, Odell's might not be as old as you think. A lot of people think it's been here centuries. Well, it was James Odell, the great-grandfather of the current Mr. Odell, who came to Stony Stratford and started that shop. It is true that there's been a blacksmith on that site since around about 1400. So there's been hardware there for a very long time. But it was James Odell who came. And he'd only opened up his shop a couple of days when a man with a flat cap came in and a bit of circular sign under his arm. And he put it down on the desk and he said, I want 2 of these in glass with beveled edges. And James Odell looked at it and said, that's going to be very expensive. Doesn't matter, need 2 of them. And James Odell said, do you mind me asking what they're for? Yep, they're the tram headlights. Brilliant, thought James Odell, because he knew about the tram that went backwards and forwards between Stony and Wolverton to take all the people backwards and forwards between the works and home. Right, they're going to come in here. That's going to be lucrative because they're expensive. I can sell them for a little bit of profit. I know what I'll do. I won't order 2. I'll order 3. Then I've got 1 in stock, just in case. Clever man, James Odell. So he ordered 3. Black Cat Man came back a few days later, picked up his order of the 2. Off he went. James Odell sat there waiting when he came back that day that he would walk in, needing the 3rd. In Odell's stockroom, to this very day, is number 3. They never needed it. It was so well made, and well, I think the current Mr. Odell might be a bit optimistic if he's hoping to sell it, unless we suddenly get trammed back again. So stories don't have to be something once upon a time and a long time ago. Stories can be something we are incredibly familiar with. But I would be doing injustice to stories if I didn't take a little flight of fancy. We'll come back to another real story in just a moment, but this one I really like. I think out of all stories, especially that I know about Milton Keynes and Stony Stratford particularly, I like this story. Because I do realise I'm competing with myself and realising how loud I am. Horsefair Green. You all know that Horsefair Green, called Horsefair Green because there used to be horses at a fair, horsefair there. But did you know there used to be a witch living on Horsefair Green? And they say that she was as ugly as a witch should be in this type of story. And she had learnt the magic arts of herbs and fortune telling and healing. She could heal anything. She could heal smallpox. She could heal a broken heart. She could heal when you hadn't had a broken heart and been doing too much of something you shouldn't be. And every day she walked from Horsefair Green to Calverton, to where the spring flows. She would gather up the water there because it was a healing spring. She would use it in her potions. She would use it to heal people, to make them better. But as the years rolled on, because she was a very, very ugly, proper, crooked nose, crooked back type of witch, well, it got difficult to start carrying those pails of water backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. So she decided that she would get herself an apprentice. A young girl who was strong and fit that could do the running backwards and forwards to Calverton for the water. And so that's what she did. She got herself an apprentice. And they say that the young girl was as beautiful as the old crone was ugly. Because that's what they are. Little girl. She went each day. She got the water. She drew the water. That sacred, sacred water. And she would bring it back to the spare. And slowly but surely she watched the old witch and she learnt that sacred ancient art of herbology. She knew what plants were good to heal what. She learnt how to deal with people. She learnt how to deal with people who were ill, people who were sad, people who were heartbroken. She learnt how to deal with people who just wanted to talk. Because sometimes that's really the only cure you need to give sometimes, is just a lend an ear. And as the years rolled by, she began to learn more and more skills, but she wanted to know when she was going to get to the real magic. You know, herbs, mixing the herbs, that was all right, but you know, you could do that if you were cooking. And talking to people, that's all right, but why did she always have to talk to snotty-nosed kids and coughing people and she wanted to know when the real magic would kick in, you know, the exciting stuff. Frog. Hat. Well, the old witch said, in time, in time, in time. Well, one day, girl, she went down, she was pouring the water as she always did, when she heard yapping. She looked up and there was a scruffy little dog bounding towards her and being dragged on the end of a piece of rope, a makeshift lead, was a young lad, good-looking chap. There was a complete crown of scruffy, dark hair, beautiful face underneath. He was a young gypsy lad. But she very soon noticed that he walked quite strangely. He walked in a way that seemed to suggest he couldn't see. And sure enough, when he sat down on the bank, she discovered that he was blind. And he asked her to get him a cup of water. She took the cup, she passed it to him, and he drank. And she would never afterwards know why, but there was an urge suddenly in her, and she took off the red kerchief that she wore around her neck. And she put it into the water, and as she placed it into the water, she spoke sacred words and a sacred rhyme that her mistress had taught her, and the red seeped from that kerchief until it turned white. And when she picked it up, she wiped it across the eyes of the gypsy boy, and he blinked. And suddenly he could see light. Suddenly he could see colours. The images were blurred, but they were clearing all the time, and suddenly he could see her. And maybe it was just because she was the first thing he had ever seen, but he thought she was beautiful. He was absolutely enamoured like that. So much so that he carried the pails of water home for her. Well, the girl, she was delighted. I've done it! I'm a witch of magic. And so she was off home to go and tell her mistress. But when they got there and they arrived in the kitchen, the mistress was sat in her chair by the fire. Mistress, 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 I've done it, mistress, mistress. In that moment that the power had transferred, the old witch knew her job was done and had shuffled from this mortal coil onto the next. And so now the girl realised she was no longer a girl, that she was the witch of Stony Stratford. She was the one that had to give the So when the young gypsy lad turned around and said, "My darling, I love you, marry me," she was like, "I can't marry you. I'm the witch of the people. I've got to serve them." And he said, "All right, well, you serve them and I'll serve you." And the years rolled on and he didn't believe her. He went and got the pail of water for her every single day. And at some point, she put him out of his misery and she finally said yes. So the next time you're walking around Horsefair Green and you've got a bit of cough, a bit of a limp, or you're just feeling a bit downhearted, well, just remember, there used to be, and who knows, maybe still is, a witch in Horsefair Green. So, yes, wonderful stuff. Not many people know that Milton Keynes was involved with gunpowder plot. Sir Edward Digby owned Gayhurst Manor, just a little bit north of Newport County, and he knew Guy Fawkes. In fact, Guy Fawkes did a lot of the plotting at Gayhurst Manor, and it was Sir Edward Digby that was involved right up to his neck, so much so that when the plot was discovered, he was arrested for treason, he was hung, drawn and quartered, and just as they plucked out his still beating heart, the executioners pulled it forth and said, "Here be the heart of a traitor!" And with his last breath, Sir Edward said, "Thou slayest." But that's not the only gunpowder plot that's happened here in Milton Keynes. Not even the only gunpowder plot. The one that happened here in Stony Stratford. In 1859, George Atkins, now he's a bit of a local entrepreneur, he owned a greengrocer's on the High Street. And he was a bit of a Dickensian boss, but then it was that kind of era. Everybody was a Dickensian kind of boss at the time. You know, long hours, little pay. There are some people who are thinking, that sounds familiar. But he had a greengrocer's, about 8 or 9 people worked out. But on the 25th of November, one of the younger members of staff, she was sweeping up the floor when she suddenly noticed a rope leading to the stockroom. She thought, well, that's a bit odd. She bent down to have a bit of a closer look, and it was absolutely drenched in saltpeter. Very flammable stuff, if you're not sure what it is. And she thought, well, that's a bit odd. She went over to the stockroom, she opened it up, there was a trail of gunpowder going to a £100 keg of gunpowder. Somebody was really upset with George Atkins. We don't know why, we don't know how or what, but his greengrocers would have gone kaboom that very night if it hadn't have been for that young maid. And so she discovered it, the plot was foiled. And, well, George didn't seem to have any other attempts on his life after that, so we're not entirely sure what was going on. We do know that a couple of members of staff did get sacked very shortly afterwards, so maybe that had something to do with it. So, if you do happen to work in Stony Stratford and you do have any gripes, don't get me. And one last final story for you. And this is a story that I've written as part of my PhD to be my little ode to Milton Keynes. There was a time where there were too many people and not enough houses. Sounds kind of familiar. And so the government decided what it was going to do was to build new towns. And the very last, and the biggest, and the most successful of them, they called it Milton Keynes. And people came in their thousands from all over the country, all over the world, to gather and to become part of Milton Keynes. It shined, it glittered in its newness, Its people were new, its houses were new, everything about it was brand spanking and shiny and new. But all the other towns and villages started to get a bit jealous. They started to make snide comments that because it was so new, it didn't have any cultural heritage. It had less cultural heritage than a yogurt. And Milton Keynes started to feel quite sad and a bit lost. But it thought, as the time rolled by, I'm now 50. I'm not so new anymore. Surely people must like me better now. But it listened and the jokes were still going. And it was around about this point that a passing traveller, a storyteller, came through and heard all of these stories of no culture and no heritage, and saw the people busily running around doing their lives and not noticing the stories that were hiding absolutely everywhere. And so the storyteller thought to herself, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to gather up these stories and I'm going to share them with the people. And so she called the stories to her and she took them out and she shared them to every single person that she met. And they took these stories and, much like a very cute puppy or kitten, took them home, cared for them, and started sharing them with other people and other people, until suddenly the stories didn't have to hide in the shadows anymore. The stories were proud to come out and play. And it was then that the people realised they were the storytellers, and that the difference between Milton Keynes and a pot of yogurt is that Milton Keynes has stories and therefore heritage. Thank you very much. So I'm going to talk very briefly now about what I did with my participants. Then we're going to have a short break, during which time you can go and check out some of their work. And then after the break, I'm going to call my 3 participants who are here tonight with us to come up and share the oral stories that they created during the workshops. And after which, you will then have a chance to ask questions from me. You can ask about Milton Keynes, you can ask about storytelling, you can ask about the PhD. You can't ask for the winning lottery numbers, I'm afraid I don't know that. Or you can ask questions of my participants about their experience and what they went through. And maybe if I annoyed them some, will go, stories, stories, stories. So, with my participants, I did an open call for participants right across Milton Keynes. I had 5 spaces. I only wanted to work with 5 people because I wanted to work quite closely with them so that we could chart their sense of place through the journey to see whether storytelling had any effect. So they did a questionnaire right at the beginning before they started doing any workshops, and then they repeated that questionnaire right at the end of the process. We also had a review session where they got to chat about, they got to watch their videos of their live storytelling, their oral storytelling, and also their digital, and have a little chat about how they felt the process went. So we started off looking at digital storytelling, and if you don't know what digital storytelling is, it's very different from oral storytelling. So what I've just done there was oral storytelling, and kind of what I'm doing here is what's known as platform storytelling. So I am giving a performance, you are sat as an audience there. Applied storytelling, I should have explained this earlier. Applied storytelling is where you take storytelling into the community and I don't perform it, I get other people to share their stories and to work with stories. So that's using it at a community level basis. So that's the difference between platform and performance. They're usually oral stories, so they might come from a written source. I have about 500 stories in my head, and about half of them come from written sources. The other half came from orally transition. So a storyteller gave me a story because I'm going, oh, it's a really brilliant story. Can I tell that one? And they go, So digital storytelling is somewhat different because it tends to be more personal. What I was telling there were folk tales, histories, urban myths. But digital stories tend to have some relation to the person who's telling them. And you don't always see the person who's telling them. Very often you just see images that relate to that story and you just hear their voice. And the other difference to oral storytelling and digital storytelling is oral storytelling, you don't script it, it's not recited. It changes a little bit every time it's told because an oral storyteller works with the audience. You are co-creators of the story, you are co-artists in the storytelling then. It's not, I might be up here telling the words, but I'm reading you guys all the time. And hopefully I'm sort of checking, oh, that person's a bit bored, I need to give a bit more energy to that. Oh, that person, oh, they're really liking blood, guts and gore, I'll give them a bit more blood, guts and gore. Oh, but that person over there is really feeling a bit squeamish, so I'll tame it down again. So I'm reading you and reacting to you as an oral storyteller. But in digital storytelling, you tend to script what you're going to say, even if it's not like word by word, but you bullet point it so you know exactly, right, that's going to be that, that's going to be that, that's going to be that, because you only have 3 minutes. That's the maximum length of a digital story. They tend to be very short, sharp and snappy on one particular subject, quite emotive, and they're there to generate an empathy between you and the teller. So we started with digital storytelling because I will hold my hand up. I had space for 5 participants. I got 3, which was, I was a little bit sort of like, I wanted a full 5. And the 3 that I got, lovely people, don't get me wrong. The 3 I got sort of cheated the system because before I started doing my PhD, I taught adult storytelling classes up at York House for any adults that are interested to come along and learn about how to tell stories. And I've had 3 people with me for, what, 3-4 years now? And then when I started this year, just as I went into September, my 3rd year, I said I can't do it anymore. I've got to take a year out while I do my writing up. But I am doing my my practical workshops, and yeah. So my 3 students, who I said no more classes, just decided to come and do the participants instead. So they weren't newbies to storytelling. I should point that out. That's something I'm now going to make very aware in my PhD, that they were not newbies. They were very good at storytelling. They've even had their own gigs and performed all everywhere. And I should point out, they are having their own gig. They've flown the nest. My babies have gone. But they've still invited me to come along and prattle along a bit at their gig. So, if you enjoy stories tonight, then I will give a plug to that. But they've never done digital storytelling. I'd sort of hinted and done a little bit with them, but I threw them in the deep end with digital storytelling. It's like, I think you know what storytelling will do. And it was a very different process, but you can ask them about that a little bit later on. So they did 2 digital storytelling workshops. One was an all-day one, and the other one was just an evening top-up for those who wanted it. And then the other 4 sessions were on oral storytelling. We were looking at how to break the story down, how to memorize it, how to convey it, how to make it your own. And we did lots of different exercises and pulling stories apart to really get to the meat of the matter before putting them back together. So that might give you a little bit of a taster. All the stories they worked with had to be connected to Milton Keynes in some way, shape or form. And all of the participants had to be from Milton Keynes, or living here, or having worked here at some point. They all were, and they all created, I think, quite fabulous stories. So I'm going to ask you to now take a little bit of a break, take the opportunity to go and check out some of the video footage, to leave me some feedback, to read a little bit more. You can even come up and ask me a couple of questions during the break, but I would ask that if you've got anything philosophical or meaty, that you keep the questions and answers a little bit later on, because then we can share it and I'll catch it on camera, which was great for me being able to go back and review. Thank you very much for listening to the first half, and enjoy the work that is presented during the break, and I'll see you in the second half. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the second half. I am about to introduce you to my participants. I put them through the mill. I made sure that they knew what being a storyteller was. I pushed them hard. And I have to say, they have done me credit. They have come out with, they generated, in the end, there was 4 digital stories that they created. One of them got excited and did 2. And there were 3 oral stories. If you want to see the digital stories, they are on that laptop. We cannot recreate them for you up here, but we can give you the live version of the stories. To keep this is the odd bit. When you do a PhD, they make you do ethics. Ethics is the bizarrest thing ever, because it works for science, anonymity, but it doesn't work when you're doing the arts and you go to them and you go, yeah, but I'm going to have participants who want to stand up and tell their stories. They don't want to be anonymised, they want people to know who they are because it's their story. But still, in my paper, I had to give them code names. And so, I will introduce you, and then they can stand up if they wish to release their anonymity. But we had KMMK 181. We had KMMK 182. We had KMMK 183. And what you're going to see now is them in order. So when I was programming the evening, I thought, what could I do? I'm just going to put them in the order that they came, because I gave out the sheet, so I didn't know who was going to be what number. I just gave out the sheets. You choose who you want to be in. That's the order that they came in. So you're going to see them in their order. So you now know their code name. If you tell it to anybody else, I will have to come around and kill you. But yes, so they have their code names. You might know them by other names, but you now know they've got a secret code name. They're almost like undercover spy storytellers. So they're going to come up. They're each going to give you their stories. Please give them a huge round of applause afterwards, and then at the end we will all gather, and then you can hit us with as many stories, many questions as you want. We will try to answer as much as we possibly can, and if we don't know something, we will be honest, because we are storytellers, and storytellers deal with truth through metaphor. We are not liars. We bend. Anyway, without any further ado, may I introduce KMMK 181.
It's actually quite appropriate. And I want to say thank you to Terrie for letting us take part in her PhD project, and for all of you for turning out to listen, because it gives us one more chance to stand up and tell our stories. I'm Lynette Hill, KMMK181, and I live in Bletchley, so I'm going to tell you a story about Bletchley Park, which Winston Churchill famously called the golden goose that never cackled. And it was Britain's secret weapon in World War II. Can you keep a secret? I mean, a real secret, a proper secret, a a secret that might get you killed if you told it, or someone else killed. Would you take that secret on voluntarily, knowing that it could be fatal? Well, that's what Mimi Galilee did at the age of 14, when she became the youngest person to sign the Official Secrets Act of Great Britain. Obviously, she lived in extraordinary times. She was an evacuee and in 1939 evacuated to Bletchley to get out from under the bombing in London. Eventually, her mother and older sister joined her in Bletchley. And her mother and older sister got jobs at this place called Bletchley Park, where they couldn't even talk about what they did at work, not even to each other. And Mimi, she was 14. She was crammed into a temporary building, cold, with lots of other children she didn't know. And there was so much going on in the world. Her home was bombed out, the world was on fire. She just couldn't keep her mind on her books. And so finally her mother relented and had a word with the commander at Bletchley Park, and he said, yeah, we have a job for Mimi, but she'll have to keep the secret just like everyone else. And I don't know if Mimi had this particular experience, but many of the people who went to Bletchley Park said that when they went to sign the Official Secrets Act, the commander would place a loaded revolver next to the piece of paper that they signed, just to make sure that everyone understood how vital the secrecy was, how serious this was. And so what happened at Bletchley Park, now we can tell the secret, is there would be listening posts on the East Coast that were recording German intelligence, which was all in code. And motorcycle riders, mainly women, wearing firearms, they were armed, would bring the raw dispatches to Bletchley Park, where they were indexed and cross-referenced in a big old building that used to be a fruit barn. And Mimi would pick up those raw dispatches and take them over to Hut 8, which is where Alan Turing worked to decrypt German naval intelligence. And then she would trade those for a batch of decrypted messages that she would take to Hut 10 or to the main building, where they were analyzed and translated. She could not look at the messages she carried. She could not look in the hut. And even if she did know who worked there, she couldn't admit that to anyone, even if it was her own sister who worked in one of the huts. Now, eventually, Mimi was promoted to work in one of the huts herself. She worked in Hut 5, which is no longer standing, and this is called Heartbreak Hut, because this is the place where the British found out what was happening in the Holocaust and how the Nazis were murdering millions of Jews and Roma or Gypsies, communists, homosexuals, anyone they didn't like. And so Mimi didn't stay there very long. She went on to work at the main headquarters. They worked 24 hours a day in all weather, rain, snow, heat. And they worked until they won. Suddenly it was over. The war was over. They passed on back into civilian life. Everyone else was getting their parades, soldiers and merchant marines, and everyone else had the parade and were the toast of the pubs, but the people of Bletchley Park, they just scattered back into normal life, and still they had to keep their secret. It wasn't until about 30 years later, in the mid-70s, that finally the secrecy was broken and they could speak to each other. And there's a story that there was a married couple, happily married, who didn't find out until 30 years later that they had both been working in Bletchley Park in different places, and that's how strict the secrecy was. But imagine having that kind of secret and not being able to speak it for 30 years. Is that something you think you could do? And that's Mimi's story.
Thank you, Lynette. KMMK 182 to your post.
I am not a number, I'm a free man. I have a love story for you. It's not Romeo and Juliet. It's not King Edward IV and Elizabeth Woodville. It's not even Rob and Liz Gifford. It's not even Edward I and Queen Eleanor. It's the story of Jim and Mabel. You probably haven't heard them. Why should you? There's no statue, there's no Shakespeare, there's no school named after them. But I think there's a specialness to their story which I'd like to share with you. But let me introduce you to Jim and Mabel first. Jim is a 20-year-old apprentice engineer from Birmingham. Nice to meet you. Mabel is a 19-year-old lady's maid from a big fine house in London. Pleased to meet you. Of course, I can't introduce them to each other. I have to leave that to fate, and fate intervenes on this occasion by sending the death of a very, very distant relative of both of them. But it wasn't a sad occasion. The lady was of great age, she had a good innings, as we say. So it wasn't a mournful occasion, it was a celebration. And Jim and Mabel were by far the youngest people there. So it was not unexpected that they would both find themselves sitting on the same pew in the church, or indeed that they were behind each other in the queue for a cup of tea, or indeed that their elbows touched when they sat down to drink their tea and eat their sandwiches of cucumber with the crusts cut off. And there they learned that they had something else in common, beyond a very distant relative. They both discovered that they were keen cyclists. Not a mile or two, but 10, 20 miles. And something more, they both discovered that they had Claude Butler bicycles. Now, Claude Butler was the James Dyson of the bicycle age. So while everybody else was riding around on their Hoovers, some people were riding around on Claude Butlers. Now, they looked like bikes. They had the gears as standard. They weren't more expensive than the other bikes, but they had something different. They were stylish. Now, this was designed especially by Claude Butler. Now, he didn't like people calling his bikes Claude Butler because he thought the name was a bit effeminate, Claude Butler. But wiser heads prevailed. They said, no, people will enjoy having your bikes and they will cherish them. And that's what people did. They bought Claude Butlers, and when they upgraded them to Claude Butlers. But Claude Butler had his wish, because people didn't call them Claude Butlers, they called them CBs. Jim and Mabel both had a CB, and they talked about how they had kept it and how they drove around, and they cycled and where they went, and the afternoon flashed by, and soon it was time to go home, and they realised that they really wanted to see each other a little more. But this was the 20s, travelling was expensive. Jim was in Birmingham, and Mabel was in London. How was this to be accomplished? We can always wait for the next funeral, said Mabel. Jim laughed, and I have an idea. He reached into his pocket and he pulled out a map which he always took with him, even when he went to funerals. He spread it on the table and they opened it up. He said, there am I in Birmingham, there are you in London, and look, there's a road that joins us up, bit of a dogleg here, called the A5. Mabel said, I know what you mean. She leaned forward, she put her finger on the middle of the map, and she said, why don't we meet up halfway? This can be our rendezvous. And I think, yes, here. She put her finger down on the map. He looked forward and put his finger next to hers. Yes, he said, but it means a journey of 2.5 hours. Are you up for this, lass? I am if you are, lad, she said. The next day off they had, Jim cycled down from Birmingham, Mabel cycled up from London, and they met at their rendezvous. And that was their first date. And that's how they started walking out together. And they cut many a fine look as they cycled around the rendezvous, because most people who have Claude Butlers were in cities. Country people had not seen CBs before. And they were handsome, and they were young. And many a person turned and looked at them with admiration, and there was also a few wagging fingers because Mabel insisted on wearing trousers. This is the 20s, women did not wear trousers, but she said that she explained to Jim, this is practical and this is comfortable. And Jim loved her all the more for that. Now the town of Rendezvous was not quite what it is now. It was on a very busy thoroughfare. All the lorries coming down from Birmingham and all the lorries going up from London thundered through this town. And you had to have your wits about you. It was difficult crossing the road. There's a lovely story that talks of two men who were walking along the side of the road, and across the other side of the road they noticed their friend turning, and he waved them over. But do what they could not cross the road. It was full of Leylands and Fodens and Bedfords, all those lovely old heritage lorries which could kill you. And after half an hour they just gave up. And one mate turned to his other and says, this is impossible. How on earth did Turnip get to the other side of the road? Ah, said his friend, he was born that side of the road. So you had to have your wits about you. One day, Jim turned up with his arm in a plaster and a sling. I'd love to be able to tell you that it was a result of a collision with a tram in Rendezvous, because the town of Rendezvous had a very special tram. The largest tram in the world, a tram that could take 100 men from Rendezvous to the nearest engineering town. 100! But it didn't happen in Rendezvous, so I can't tell you that story. No, it happened in Birmingham. Jim was not paying attention. The front wheel of his CV happened to get caught in a tram line, and it flicked him over, broke his arm. But plastered up, got a sling, and that very day he made the journey down to the Rendezvous, as he did not want to miss meeting Mabel. This was their courtship, and this went on for 5 years. Mabel brought sandwiches, usually cheese. Jim brought fruit, mostly apples. And when they had their money, they would go into a hostelry and buy a bottle of fizzy Vimto, which they would share. When Jim's apprenticeship ended, he got a special job. And he said to Mabel, I have prospects. I'd like to propose to you. Would you accept my hand in marriage? I would like to think that he got off his bicycle to propose to her, but I can't be sure. She accepted, and they started to look around Birmingham for a little house, but they had no deposit. They couldn't get a house. But Mabel's employer came up with this wonderful idea, because they weren't happy to lose Mabel. In the 5 years, she had changed from being a lady's housemaid, she had become the head housekeeper. She was a woman of great importance to the household. Why don't you marry your young man, said the employer, and both of you come and live in our gatehouse. I told you it's a farmhouse. Jim can be our chauffeur, our mechanic, and our odd job man, and you can carry on being the head of the house. This is what they did. It was a wonderful opportunity, and they were able to save some money. So by the time the children came along, they had a deposit, and they were able to go back to Birmingham and buy that little house. Jim and Mabel still cycled. In fact, when Claude Butler brought out a tandem, they were one of the first to buy it, and they had special modification. There was Jim at the front, there was Mabel at the back, and in the middle there was a special seat for their child, and they cycled around. They had a second child. The family thrived. During the war, Jim was in a reserved occupation in Birmingham, probably the most dangerous place in this country. At night, he was an air raid precaution officer. They survived the war, the children grew up. Each of the children went off and found a partner. The daughter came back one day and said, I've met a rather nice young man. He would like to ask for my hand in marriage. The man came in. He was a man of prospects. I have just got the most amazing job, he said. They're building a new town down south called Milton Keynes. I've got a job there. So permission was given. Jim and Mabel, as very happy they'd come. They came to Milton Keynes, they looked around, and they bought a house just outside Milton Keynes in Stony Stratford. And one weekend they drove up to Birmingham and brought Jim and Mabel down to look at their house. They sat in the garden, they drank tea, they ate cucumber sandwiches with the crusts cut off. And Jim got up to stretch his legs. He walked down the bottom of the garden and looked over the hedge, and then he started shouting and waving his arms. Mabel rushed over to see what it was, and soon she was shouting and waving her arms, and the children were called over. It seemed that at the bottom of the garden, over the hedge, was the exact rendezvous spot that Jim and Mabel had met all those years ago. And they had not told this to their daughter, Melissa. And it seemed that rendezvous was, in fact, Stony Stratford. Now, their story is not commemorated in statues or Shakespeare or many of schools, but I do think it's part of the living heritage of Stony Stratford. The story of Jim and Mabel is the story of ordinary people. It is the story of us.
And now, your third and final story, may I introduce KMMK 183. Otherwise known as Silver Signal.
Once upon a time, there was an ancient oak tree, and that time is now. It stands on the edge of Shenley Wood, and it's a boundary oak. It marks the boundary between several ancient parishes of Milton Keynes. And now it's an ancient oak, but 430 years ago it was a young, patriotic English sapling, and that was at the time of the Spanish Armada. And if you look into the trunk of the oak, now you can see an ancient wooden face. And this is a story of how that face came to be there. Philip of Spain wanted to depose Queen Elizabeth. And he sent, as everybody knows, he sent the Armada, the Spanish Armada, to conquer Britain, to conquer England. But he had a plan B, and that was to send his finest assassin, whose name was Monsieur Assassin. And he was actually French, because they make the very best assassins. But anyway, as I'm sure you all know, the Armada met with misfortune. He met with Drake's fire ships and was more or less destroyed, except for a few straggling ships. So Plan B had to go into effect, and Monsieur Assassin was landed on the coast near the Wash, and desperate to get inshore because all the shore was observed by people expecting to pick up straggling Spanish sailors and soldiers. So he made inland, and he followed the track of the Great Ooze along, living off the fat of the land, eating squirrels and hedgehogs and other things that are tasty to French people, quite still. Pamel, over there. He made his way along the River Ouse up till when he passed Bedford. In fact, notice Bedford. Bedford. Anyway, he came to a place called Stony Stratford, and there was the ideal place to put into effect the second stage of Plan B, which was to follow the road, because of the Roman road, and to make his way down south so he could get to London and the Queen. But as soon as he got to Stony Stratford, it was recognised as a hue and cry. Man, are you French? Sort of, part Spaniard. So, but anyway, he fled. He had fled into the interior and found his way off the beaten track, near to where Westbury Farm is now. And he hid in the wood. Then he heard this voice. Hide in me. I will protect you. And Monsieur said, speaking oak tree, speaking oak sapling. This doesn't sound good to me, but what have I to lose? You know, some cracked along in the oak tree. Grabbed him by squeezed him until he merged with the oak itself. And his face stuck. It was like that. And there he remains to this day, peering out from the oak tree as a warning to people who had deposed the queen of the land or whatever. So that's the end.
Stay there. I'm going to invite my other two participants up, if I may. So Lynette and Steve, would you like to come and join me? Can we give them a huge round of applause? So those 3 stories that you've just heard were created in that 4-week oral storytelling process that we did. And interestingly, with Lynette and with Steve, their digital story, or one of Steve's digital stories, relates to his oral story. So it was explored in a couple of different ways. So it was quite, it was quite novel to be able to look at a story from different perspectives, but being around that area. So now is the part of the evening where I hand over to you. We've done a lot of talking today. We're probably going to do a little bit more, but it will be guided by what you would like to know. So if anybody would like to ask any questions of the participants, of myself, and would like to know anything about storytelling or Milton Keynes or the process of doing a PhD or dyslexia or any of that, then please do ask. So over to you.
The word story is quite interesting, isn't it? Because you said at the beginning about lies, didn't you? Right, way back at the beginning. And I'm just thinking to something I was at where there was a bit of confrontation going on, and one person said, "I'm glad you had the chance to tell your story, which was meant to be positive. I'm not lying." Was the reaction she got. And I just wonder how you would think the term, because it is quite a powerful term, I think, story, because it is what it is you have to say, what it is you have to tell. I don't know if you've got any thoughts from your experience about how we could get the term to be used in its, people to understand the richness of it.
It is difficult because, I mean, a lot of people don't even know what a storyteller is. I often get invited to read. Do you see a book? I mean, I know we're in a library, but I often get invited, and then they and children will come up to me and say, "Thank you for reading to us." I'm a witch myself. I have my imaginary book. It is a very difficult term to isolate what it means, especially when you've got filmmakers and novel writers saying, "I'm a storyteller." I mean, even politicians will claim they are storytellers, that they're telling a story. But they try to sort of insinuate it for the positive note, it doesn't really work. So, story can be quite ambiguous, and we all have our own opinion of what story is, and to a certain extent, I don't think I want to challenge that, purely because that's how story story works. I was explaining to somebody in break. The story I hear as I tell it is not the story you hear as I say it. Because the story that I am telling is shaped by the experiences that I've had. And the stories that you hear, although we're all in the same room, I can guarantee that every single one of you has had a slightly different experience because the experiences you've had in your life. A little experiment that I do to explain this. The knight was riding through the valley. Just a little clip from the story. The knight was riding through the valley. Please put your hand up if your knight was clad in armour. Please put your hand up if your knight was riding a horse. Please put your hand up if your valley was rocky. If your valley was grassy. If your valley was wooded. Please put your hand up if the knight was riding through the valley. Okay? So just that one phrase that can be innocently inserted into a story, you all had different images. Okay? That's how story works. So I think that if we tried to pin story down too much, it wouldn't work. Because it is what it is. And so some people will always insist that stories are lies, that stories are negative. And that's probably because of the experiences that they've had. You know, they've probably been told there's lovely fairy tales as children, grown up, life hasn't been so good, and those stories were lies! They set me up to fail! The stories didn't tell you up to fail. All those fairy stories contain a lot of truth. You know, Cinderella's 5,000 years old. There's a reason we keep telling it over and over and over and over again. So yeah, I think the ambiguity of a story is a positive thing because it allows it to do the job that it's there to do, is to carry truths about ourselves, because story makes us examine ourselves. When you hear a story, whether it's a real life story, whether it's a fairy tale, whether it's an urban myth, you are reflecting your experiences in the images that it creates in your mind. You are getting a mirror into yourself, and this is why story works on very many deep levels. And so you have to be careful when you're a storyteller. You have to be aware of what you're telling. I mean, the greatest moment I have in my life is when I'm telling a story and there'll be a change in somebody's eye in the audience. It will just go. And I will never know what that moment was to that person. But it's been revolutionary, and something in my story changed for that person. They heard something in it that made a connection or brought back a memory or did something. And it was my story. I told it, but I don't know what's just happened to that person. And it's a wondrous thing to observe. But I have no right to go up after the story and go, that moment you had in the story, what was it? And sometimes people come up and go, oh, in that story I had this moment, and that's lovely if they want to share it to me, but I have no right to go and ask for it. But equally, there is the other side, that sometimes I can be telling a story quite innocently. And the other thing can happen, it will awake something, and you will see somebody go through a very negative emotion. It's like, oh, I never put that in the story. And so this is why I was talking earlier on about it is very co-created between listener and storyteller. We are making the story together. And, you know, I have to be careful, storytellers have to be careful about what we present, because we don't know what experiences you've been through. We don't know how you will hear that story. We have to give it carefully, treat it carefully, and hope it does what we intend. And our intention should be for good. Yes. A long answer to your short question. Any other questions?
I wonder where song fits in this. there's one particular song that I've been hearing all evening, Naomi Rose's Fire in the Garden, which was about, I think it was the second international festival, where a French group of
Pyrotechnics.
Yeah, pyrotechnics took over Campbell Park, and I think for a lot of the people there, that was a moment when Milton Keynes sort of matured at a certain level. And there's one or two other songs from local artists, like the Monkey Kettle guy, his song about getting drunk and ending up on. Yeah, does song form a part of, because I think it does form part of the story, the people's story.
Yeah, I mean, I think songs, there are a lot of narrative songs. You get narrative poems, and they certainly contain a story, and it's a story in a different format. And if you go back to the Anglo-Saxon times, stories of poetry, prose was almost chanted and very rhythmical, and it was still telling a story. A lot of the Norse sagas had that sort of rhythmical kind of conveyance, and it was a way that people could remember them. So stories aren't abstract from songs or poetry. They can be sort of living inside of, hopping on the coattails of, sharing the same space as. And if you go back to before sort of the folklorists really got involved, stories and songs sat together. It was really only when the folklorists came along and had an interest in the lyrics, because they didn't even take the music. They kind of thought, oh, stories, who needs that? That's for children. Songs, and they just took the lyrics. And so they, in one way, they preserved something, so we now have evidence of what songs, lyrics were told, but they also stripped something away. And something I've always been quite personally keen on, and I know a couple of other storytellers and some folk singers are, is collaborating between folk singers and storytellers, because the storytellers know the folk stories and the folk singers know the folk songs, and very often when we all kind of get together, a folk singer will start singing and then the storyteller will go, oh, I know the story that goes with that one, yeah! And we started over the last sort of 10, 15 years, we're starting to try and put these things back, because they would have gone together. The story and the song wouldn't have been separate. You would have gone to an evening and somebody would have started telling a story, and a song would have intersected it just so it didn't get too boring. Because if it's a story that's going on for like 3 or 4 hours, you need something to liven it up. Or the song would have been used as a prologue and epilogue, so you would have got a bit of the song at the beginning, the story, and then the prologue. So these things would have sat together at a certain point. We live in a society that likes to have everything in boxes. That's that compartment and there's that compartment. And so, and it's not just our society, we've been doing that for a while. And I think that therefore things have got separated. I'm always quite keen to put things back together. This is why I think communities need stories, because if you start to share a story, not only are you communicating with each other, but you're forming a common ground. So, which is the underlying basis of religion.
Yeah, pretty much all the Robin Hood stories from the ballads.
Yeah, no, I just thought maybe it's worth an appendix,
Yeah, I mean, there has, the reason I'm focusing on storytelling so heavily is, one, that's my background. Two, that's what the PhD bursary was for applied storytelling. And three, there has been a lot of PhD work looking at songs and song lyrics. So I wouldn't really be creating anything new in that ground. It's a personal interest, and it's one that I'm quite happy to look at in my own time. But it's not really an area for the PhD. And to be honest, I'm finding so many stories, and it's taking me so long just dealing with all the stories. If I started adding songs and all that in there, I'd have to turn around to my supervisor and sort of say, this is supposed to be 3 years. Can we add another 9? So I do need an end date at some
Can I throw a question at your participants?
Yes, please do.
Because I think I've, over the years, seen all three of you perform in different venues. How do you think being engaged in the workshop has improved your storytelling capability in a sentence? And I just want to say one thing to Steve. I don't think Jim would have said, "Are you up for this?" That's a very 21st century phrase. So I think you should rewrite that a little bit. Okay.
And the Birmingham accent, you know, wasn't
Well,
there.
not worry about Birmingham. You know, none of us are going to claim perfection on accents. But are you up for this? Is very 21st.
And you thought I critiqued heavily.
Fair enough, fair enough. That's fair enough. Well, the sessions involve four of us. So when you have people who trust each other and got some mileage between us, it's wonderful. You know, people can say other things, and I've abandoned things on the basis of what Lynette has said and done something else, and afterwards thought, why didn't I see that in the first place? That's an obvious thing. I think we can all say we've shared with the other person, and that has been to the benefit of all of us. You know, and I think when you have an environment like that, you take chances. You're going to try something, otherwise you're just going to go for what's safe. And I had a story, my story was given to me, somebody said, "Can I tell you how my parents met?" And I noted it and put it aside, and then when Terrie said, "Well, we were going to do that," I thought, hang on a minute, I've got an opportunity here to go back to the person and interrogate the person. What sort of bicycles were they? What did you eat? What were you wearing? And normally you don't get that opportunity, and it was just an extraordinary experience. But I wouldn't have had that framework to operate if I hadn't sat down in a group and thought, right, you know, where are we going to go? So you can't just go everywhere, you've got to go somewhere. And it's that, I think that's that trust and that ability to go out and ask questions. Not to go looking for an answer, because you don't know what an answer is.
Absolutely, everything Steve said, and also for me, just the depth of knowledge that Terrie has about the local area and everything. And I particularly have to come in and say, this is how you would say this here kind of thing, because I am coming from the US, and translating it into a form that people will understand and consider credible. That is what I would add to what Steve said. It's a safe space, we can bounce ideas off of each other, and just the wealth of knowledge that is here, particularly with Terrie and the rest of the group, that's been incredibly helpful.
I think for various reasons, I don't feel that I was able to put as much commitment into it as some people. So, I mean, mine was quite improvised, actual story, and it would improve with more research. I think actually more detail,
Sounds like
more
a
factual.
PhD. That's a PhD final comment. More research is needed.
But the constraint of having it to be something to do with Milton Keynes, and that was kind of an interesting part of the exercise, and that was just inspired by the local features around my part of Milton Keynes. In fact, you know, kind of Shenley, and there was that tree, and also the oak door in the sort of south wing at Westbury Farm, which is reputed to have been brought there on the Spanish Armada. Something like that. It's an oak door, and it looks really, it's believable because it's kind of very well lit, you know. So those kind of ideas came together to concoct something that isn't necessarily accurate, but it's fun to do. And I actually don't mind being not very good in front of an audience.
So you were.
But I mean, I feel there's kind of room for improvement there. Actually, there's kind of a basis for something. So I feel encouraged to do more things, and that's kind of work in progress. So rather than expecting this to be a finished product, it's kind of there's more that can be done.
And the workshop gives you the excuse to go around and do the research and ask all your nosy questions. I have homework I have to ask.
It's for a PhD.
But there is a sense that when you start off that you're looking for something that says a story, and you're looking for a book that says a story, and then you're walking past Queen Eleanor mural. There's the story, and that made me stop thinking, hang on a minute, there's the story is talking here, and it's how we relate to that, and what is the background to that, and what is the iconography, what's been put on that wall. And it was then I went to the other story, a modern love story, if you like, and how those sort of connect. And they are living stories. I mean, there's probably every person in this room has a story of how they came to Milton Keynes, and it's all part of that. And they are extraordinary stories. We think they're ordinary. We're looking for something in a book.
That's a very good line on which to stop. It's gone 9 o'clock. Sorry, I'm getting very anal about this.
That's absolutely
Because it's Living Archives line, and everybody has a story to tell. And Living Archive is one of the great products, I think, of Milton Keynes over the last 50 plus years. Stony Words has always prided itself on being about the word, which sounds a bit Protestant and evangelical, but I don't care. And I think tonight we really have heard the word in a variety of lexicons, in a variety of levels, and in a variety of ways. So thank you very much, Terrie, and your eager or otherwise participants. Great to see Lynette, Phil, and Steve perform for us as well. But please, just let's say thanks again to our team for this evening.